Hello and welcome to Patrick's Models and Transport. So this evening we're going to have another look at the GèGè rubber band driven locomotive, the one we tested with those spectacular, chaotic, riotous results the other evening, where it was spinning around and total chaos. Anyway, I've had another look at the locomotive. I've tested it on the layout various times and I've worked out how to drive it, and of course this locomotive behaves better in travelling in one direction. You can see that there's a number 2 there. I put these numbers when I disassembled the locomotive because I always think that if something has been sitting in the same position for probably, it could be the best part of half a century, because these are very old locomotives. I think production ended in the 1970s, so if it's not 50, it's pretty close to it. And the other, so there's a 2 here and a 1 here, because this is when I was working. So I've noticed that on the layout, if I go this way, if I go clockwise around the layout, the locomotive performs better. Probably because, as you can even see on the left here, there's this layout is warped. It's warped because it's very lightweight. It's made of very flexible plywood. I calculated the dimension according to the track I had. I calculated it according to the size of the boot in my car, because I bought 2 80 by 80 centimeter pieces of plywood and then I joined them together with these runners at the side, these sections of wood, plus there's a piece of wood glued underneath in the center to stop, so that it sits nice and straight. The join, as you can see, that there's a join there. The reason for this small layout, and I've been wanting to talk about this for some time, is that I don't have space for a permanent layout. I like model trains. I restarted doing things with model trains in summer 2022, when I brought my own Lima train, what was my small at the time collection of Lima carriages and two, 3 locomotives. We haven't even finished seeing everything. Back here from my ex-bedroom and my parents' flat. And when this is the room I use also for work, this is the studio, when the layout is not in use, it stands behind that door over there. So it has to be of a certain size, and it has to be pretty light to be able to lift it up and put it out the road. So of course, standing vertical, it has tended to warp, and it's also warped a bit because it sits on a trolley, and it actually sits on the very top of the legs of the trolley. It doesn't sit flat on the actual top surface of this trolley. But that doesn't matter for me, because I want my layout to be relatively realistic. And in real life, there are inclines, things are not perfect, and so that makes running trains even more fun. The problem is that the GèGè locomotive, because of its design, it doesn't seem to like inclines very much. It also doesn't seem to like points, and it doesn't seem to like diamond crossings, and it doesn't seem to like a hell of a lot of things. So, of course, another problem, as I was saying, are the drive belts. I used normal elastics that I bought at the stationers. They're normal, just normal elastics. They're not even the natural rubber ones. So when it starts spinning, you're trying to give more power, and then you actually have an effect of reverse spinning of the wheel, of the axle, because it loses traction. It loses traction down here. It starts skidding, and it's acting practically like a top, no? And so it starts going backwards and back and forth like a rocking horse. So the main thing is that to run this locomotive, I have to, first of all, drive it from the controller. So it has to be driven. You can't just leave it there and forget about it. in one direction. You don't need to drive it, it's going clockwise. So clockwise it goes better because I think there's less hill there. When it's anti-clockwise, excuse my arm, when it's anti-clockwise it has to climb a steeper hill. Then there is a section of track. I'm just going to wheel over, and when the locomotive reaches this section, of course my track is a combination of ancient Lima steel track. This is a piece of brass, I think this is brass Fleischmann that I found beside the bins years and years and years ago. This is a nice piece of section of Lima nickel silver that I was given as a Christmas present when I was a kid. And there are Mejano points, mainly the external loop is mainly all Lima, with two pieces, two long sections of nickel silver, terrible steel bends, curved sections, and Mejano points. Mejano points are actually good quality. So this is the whole philosophy behind my layout. It's a budget layout using what we've got and just using what you've got and everything you can buy second hand. I did buy some new rails at one point at the beginning. I bought two Mejano points and some Mejano rails, some new Mejano rails. My wife bought me them as a present because she knew that I'd always wanted to have points, and she bought me them on Amazon. And then I began getting things on Vinted, and that's how most of the things you see on this layout, in fact all of the locomotives in stock you see on this layout, are all things I bought second hand on the Vinted platform. So when the GèGè locomotive comes along here, and when it goes along the layout clockwise, I can actually keep it at about 50% voltage on the Mejano controller. When it reaches this section of track, this is a bit of Lima track, it actually, the big enormous flanges touch the shoes, the sleeper shoes, and so you hear a large rumble. This is actually not a bad thing, because it gets extra traction by hitting the sleeper shoes, and in particular when it's going anti-clockwise, it reaches this point, traction increases, you give it a boost on a controller, and woof, it gets up the hill. It tends to skid on this section of Fleischmann track, which always needs cleaning because it's brass, and that's actually good because it polishes it. Anyway, let's stop chatting about the layout now. You can see anyway some of the rails. I just like it like this. I like this kind of solution. So, and makes things more interesting. And let's go back and let's go and test this locomotive. Anyway, so not only do we have to make sure we're running in a certain direction, so it goes better clockwise than anti-clockwise, but it goes better if, let's say, number 2 is going clockwise and number 1 anti-clockwise. So it works better in this conformation with 2 to the right and 2 to the left, sorry, and 1 to the right, and then if I turn the locomotive round. And you think it's just a double-headed locomotive. I mean, it should work perfectly well in both directions. I have no idea. There might even have to do with the centrifugal forces with this crazy traction layout, or the torque and so on. So this is how it works better. I am going to eventually refit the body, and of course at that point I'll have to be able to identify which ends which for running, apart from the fact that you can test it. You can see that the bodywork, this is not the original bodywork of the locomotive. This is a bodywork I'd bought beforehand. In fact, I had bought this without knowing what it was. I thought it was a Jouef, but it's just marked made in France in there. It doesn't say anything. And this is how I discovered about GèGè. because at one point I had considered just reinstating a locomotive bodywork on this chassis. This is a GèGè chassis, the one that's going to eventually become a rail car, and I thought, I'm not going to bother doing a rail car, making a rail car. I found this very cheap. I think it was €2 or something of the kind, and I said, I'll just get this and I'll fit it on, and oops, I noticed that it doesn't fit. No way, it doesn't belong to this chassis. So what does this belong to? And I began doing research and I began looking things up, and then I discovered this GèGè trains, and I was absolutely fascinated by them, and I said, wow, I'd like to get one, because I was fascinated by the mechanism, and I thought this is a great challenge. So I did eventually find one, and the original body is in a box. It's sort of in a non-prototypical blue. It doesn't have, I think it doesn't have glazing, or it has glazing but doesn't have the headlamp glazing. It doesn't look so nice, and both pantographs are missing. These are the cheap toy train GèGè range pantographs, or the earlier ones from the train sets. They're just simple bent wire pantographs. GèGè locomotives were also sold with proper hinged pantographs. They were much more realistic. I'd actually like to find them. I'd like to restore this, but I'm a bit undecided, because I like this idea, the whole idea of this locomotive. So I think I did a test with some copper wire, and I'm actually going to restore this pantograph, but I'll restore it in a closed position. And then I'll just glue it on using PVA glue, and which is very, very good for gluing metal to metal. But we'll actually do that. So when the body goes on this locomotive, it just clips on like this. I'm not doing it now because I have to make sure I don't pinch any tires. Excuse me, my phone was pointing the wrong way. And we'll do that. We'll actually do it on camera together, and that way we see how it's done. It just clips on. But I want to make sure I don't pinch any of the wires, because you never know with this thing here. Okay, so now before it's bedtime, let's get this locomotive going. Okay, so we're going to go around anti-clockwise first. Here's the mechanical controller. There it is. I like mechanical controllers. They're very, very good. And you can also buy them really cheap, again, on the Vinted platform. Okay, let's see how we get on. We'll set it up to 50% speed. Of course, now it started skidding. Started skidding again. And it is doing the pendulum effect again. Let's just pull it back. Back to it. It's like snakes and ladders. Okay, let's give it a good woof. Right. There it is on the... We're at sort of between 50 and 70, we're at 60%. Let's turn this down, closer to 50. More or less at 50 it copes. Now this is without a train. I'm very curious to see what happens when there's a train. This is the slowest we can go. You can see that it tends to slow down on the hill, and then it catches up again when it starts striking the sleeper base plates or shoes. Skidding a bit there on the points. Let's put it up more or less. It's happiest at 60. But I'm going to have to get some silicone belts to run this. It should improve no end. Oh, it's doing it. Between 60 and 70% it does the job. I'm very curious to try it with a train behind it, and how long the train can be. Okay, so now we're going to go the other direction. Let's see what happens. Mechanical controller, to go the other direction, you just switch that back, and that way it's going to go in the other direction. On we go. Let's give it a good turn of speed, because otherwise this is never going to go up the hill. It's already skidding. We're at 75%. And there's some skidding going on here. So the whole point is to keep a good smooth speed. You have to drive it with a controller, but it's really a pocket rocket. It's not even very pocket. I've not weighed it yet. You saw that it was skidding here. Look at that. Change direction. And it copes better, huh? It's okay, better going this way. So I definitely think it will be able to haul a train going clockwise. So that's a better test run, in my opinion, to what we did the other evening, and I'm very curious to see how it performs once we get the body back on. I'll weigh it once we get the body back on, and then we'll also do some tests with the bodywork on, going and even turning it around. I'm not going to do it now, otherwise this video is just getting too long. And the whole thing is, we'll have to see. I wonder how it's going to get on with the train. And of course, I'm going to try it with some lighter SNCF carriages by GèGè. I'll also try it with the Hornby ACHO, which are actually pretty heavy. They have metal bogies on them. And even with some Lima carriages as well, considering it's a relatively contemporary, recent locomotive. Recent, yes. It can go even with what I call modern trains, meaning stock of the 1970s, and that's more or less winds up this video. Regarding the real BB 9240, so this class, the BB 9200 class, the majority of the class were fitted with normal diamond pantographs. And in fact, the real BB 9240 had diamond pantographs. So probably I could even, if I wanted, I could replace. I saw some photos online of the real BB 9240, which wore this very same green livery, and it has diamond pantographs. So it could be an idea if I wanted to dismantle, but it's a GèGè locomotive. It doesn't even have proper buffers. You can see it has these molded buffers on it, so it's never really going to be a prototypical realistic model. So I think I'm just going to rebuild the wire pantograph here at the front and fit it on in closed position, and I can cannibalize some bits and pieces to actually make one. So we'll see about that, but that's not the most urgent of things. So that's it for the moment, and let me know what you think of this video. We'll be doing in the next days more running videos. We've got the very, very nice French State Railways 140 C231 280 locomotive. It's really a very nice locomotive. That one there, that's the one that I changed the traction tires on some months, I think, before Christmas, and that I never really had time to test it properly, and we've not seen it since. And we still have to do the video with a potted history of that class, so we'll actually do a proper historical video on it, and I'll get that done this weekend. So that's something to look forward to. And I think that's all for the moment. We can call it a day, and of course, cheerio from me and cheerio from this wacky GèGè locomotive. Let's just zoom it around once more. Okay, fantastic. Right, one last word on the layout. I'm actually going to make a video about the actual layout and my ideas behind this type of layout. I'm planning to add an external loop of rail, which will be a proper main line that will be connected with only one set of points to the internal main line, which will have wider radius curves using Mehano track. But what I want to do, I want to make it on a separate structure, wooden structure, probably using balsa wood because it's lightweight and it's less prone to warping. That I can actually fit on top of this, sort of join up somehow, so that I can fit it only when I want it. Because if I only want to do some testing, I can just use the layout in this format here, because it's simpler, it takes up less space. I'm also planning to make, I've got another bit of nasty plywood off the back of a bit of furniture, some wood that a friend gave me, and I'm actually planning to make a small layout, really small. Could be like a tram layout, which will also be good for testing a locomotive, something a little bit nicer with a Lima station with a bell. I'm thinking about that. That's another thing we'll be doing. Okay, so that's enough. If you like the video, any suggestions, any ideas, please feel free to do so, and say so and write so in the comments, and subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. And that's all from me. Cheerio from Mr. Chatterbox here, and from this weird locomotive. Ciao ciao.